eine Frage, beziehungsweise meine Intervention, mein Kommentar schließt ihn etwa an das, was wir zuletzt gehört haben, also die Frage der Metaphysik und Phänomenologie zum Teil. Ja. Und das bezieht sich vor allem auf die Funktion des Wahrnehmungsbegriffs, also Self-Awareness, Wahrnehmungsbegriff, also auch der Anschauungsbegriff. Also ich glaube, Sie beziehen sich darauf, also wenn Sie den englischen Begriff benutzen. Und ich meine, das scheint hier ein Problem zu sein, also aus phänomenologischer Sicht. Und vielleicht ahnen Sie schon, aus welcher Hinsicht, aus welcher Ecke kommt diese Kritik, also aus Heideggerischer wahrscheinlich. Das heißt, also zusammen mit Heidegger gesprochen, handelt es sich hier um einen phänomenologischen Ansatz, der nicht ganz metaphysikfrei ist, also wenn wir schon weiß. Wie gesagt, hier ist vor allem Husserl ausschlaggebend, ja, also sein Begriff der Anschauung, der er oft mit der Wahrnehmung vermengt, wie wir wissen aus logischen Untersuchungen. Und hier würde ich sagen, nicht nur Anschauungsbegriff, sondern auch damit zusammenhängend auch der Urimpressionsbegriff, also die Phänomenologie weil hier haben wir diese Beziehung von Diachronie und Synchronie, also darauf komme ich nochmal zurück. Dakle, moje pitanje se negdje nastavlja, ich habe noch einige Fragen, aber ich würde es gleich. Moje pitanje se na neki način nastavlja na ovo pitanje koje smo zadnje čuli, dakle, radi se o odnosu, o ostacima metafizike u fenomenologiji i onaj problem koji vidimo ovdje je u stvari ovaj pojam recepcije, ili kako da to prevedemo, opažaja, koji je ovdje centralan za teoriju kako profesora Zahavija, tako i Schmida. I tu se prije svega, mislim da su korijeni toga kod Husserla, njegove fenomenologije koja je u osnovi svega. Also, das war das erste, ja. Den phänomenologischen Gebot zu den Sachen selbst, also direkt zu werden, schlage ich dann Heidegger folgend, schlage ich vor, nicht bei der Wahrnehmung oder Anschauung, beziehungsweise bei der Gegebenheit oder wie auch immer verstandenen Präsenz, ja, sondern bei der Absenz, also bei der Abwesenheit und bei der, was Heidegger nennt, Sorge anzusetzen. Ja. Also nicht bei der Selbstwahrnehmung, nicht bei der Selbstgegebenheit, sondern bei der antizipativen, zukunftsorientierten Selbstsorge. Also die Frage lautet, ob sich sowas wie Gegebenheit, Präsenz ursprünglich selbst konstituieren kann. Oder ob er dem Zukunftsbezug, also dem Entwurf und meinetwegen seines Entwurf, das Primat bei dieser Frage der Konstitution zukommen soll. Das heißt, was ist gegeben? Also, wie ist etwas gegeben? Also, warum ist das uns gegeben? Also, und auch, wenn wir selbst das sind. Wie kommt das? Also, das ist eine Form von Mystik, sagen wir so vorsichtig, oder wie ist das? Also, Marion operiert auch mit Gabe oder ja, so. Und das ist mir nicht ganz klar, wie ist diese Evidenz jetzt phänomenologisch rechtfertigen. Okay. Dakle, ovaj drugi dio, dakle, da bismo onom fenomenološkom, onom predlošku, pretpostavci, koji kaže da treba da idemo do samih stvari, da se vratimo samim stvarima, da bismo se adekvatno, ako već postupamo fenomenološki, postupali u skladu s tim, onda predlažem da ipak krenemo od Heideggera, da pođemo od Heideggera ili zajedno sa Heideggerom da odbacimo, dakle, taj primat recepcije, primat opažaja, primat stvari, prisutnosti, primat sadašnjosti, primat prezentnosti, i da se više orijentisamo na odsustvo, dakle, na ono što nije tu, kao nešto što nas konstituiše. Dakle, i samim tim brigu, brigu u smislu egzistencijala, dakle, a što se mene tiče, možemo to zvati interes. Dakle, i brigu o samom sebi, brigu za svoju egzistenciju, dakle, nešto što, kako to da nam taj moment datosti, kako to da nismo indiferentni prema njemu, kakva je to evidencija, otkud dolazi ta neindiferentnost u pogledu na tu našu datost. već postoji. Dakle, zašto se brinemo o tom, otkud to? Dann zum Dritten, bleiben wir dann vorerst, sagen wir so, jetzt lassen wir Heidegger beiseite vorerst, bleiben wir bei diesem Anschauungsbegriff von Husserl. Es scheint mir etwas weniger differenziert zu sein, das korrigieren Sie mich, wenn ich da irre, vielleicht haben Sie da doch einiges auch ausgearbeitet, aber was ich gelesen habe, habe ich nicht gehört. Es wird immer von Gegebenheit, von der Präsenz, also von der Wahrnehmung gesprochen. Wie wir wissen aus logischen Untersuchungen, dieser Begriff der Anschauung ist etwas, vor allem im Hinblick auf die kategoriale Anschauung, ist etwas komplizierter. Das heißt, es handelt sich, Sie wissen das bestimmt ziemlich gut, also Sie haben darüber geschrieben, über logische Untersuchungen, es geht nicht nur um die schlichte Wahrnehmungsakte. Die schlichte Wahrnehmungsakte sind der Ansatz, in dem sich dann in der eidetischen Variation dann die kategorialen Inhalte in der Wahrnehmung konstituieren. Ohne Reflexion. Das heißt, Husserl spricht nicht von der Reflexion bei der Konstitution der kategorialen Akte, kategorialen Inhalte, wie etwa zum Beispiel und in der Verbindung von zwei schlichten Wahrnehmungsakten. Das ist ein kategorialer Inhalt, der in der Wahrnehmung, schlichter Wahrnehmung nicht gegeben ist. Aber da wird nicht eine Kategorie vorausgesetzt, über die wir dann reflektieren auf dieses und ihn konstruieren in der Wahrnehmung. Und so entsteht auch der kategoriale Inhalt innerhalb der Wahrnehmung, aber ohne Reflexion. Das heißt, wenn Sie von der Selbstgegebenheit des Selbst sprechen und da nicht nur einfach einen schlichten Wahrnehmungsakt meinen, sondern etwas mehr darüber, und dann wäre es interessant zu sehen, wie kommt dieses Selbst, wenn schon irgendeine kategoriale Momente bei sich hat. Wie ist das, wenn wir innerhalb von diesem Konzept der eidetischen Variation bleiben, wie kommt das zustande? Dakle, sad ostavimo najprije još Heideggera po strani i ovaj moj prijedlog. Vratimo se na logička istraživanja, odnosno ovaj Husserlov pojam pogleda, odnosno Anschauung, odnosno ove recepcije. Dakle, čitajući ove članke i knjige koliko sam uspio, dakle nisam primijetio da je ono što je kod Husserla, što se zove kategorijalni opažaj, kategorijalni pogled, da se nalaze neki tragovi u ovoj koncepciji datosti, u ovoj koncepciji percepcije i opažaja. Dakle, kod Husserla u logičkim istraživanjima, a to profesor jako dobro zna, postoji taj koncept eidetičke varijacije, to znači da postoje prosti činovi opažaja, ali da se u samom opažanju, dakle ono što Husserl zove Anschauung ili Wahrnehmung, da se u samom opažanju tim postupkom eidetičke varijacije stvaraju kategorijalni sadržaj. To znači da ne postoji nikakav pretpostavljeni aparat aksiomi kao kod Kanta, pa da se konstruiše kategorijalni sadržaj od opažaja, nego se u samom opažaju, dakle samom, tako reći, ajde recimo razvijanju tog opažaja, pojavljaju određeni kategorijalni sadržaj, na primjer konjunkcijat i između dva prosta opažaja. Dakle, to nije opažaj, nema opažanja onoga i, nego, ali u samom opažaju se konstituiše i to i. Dakle, kako bi ovaj pogled, u pogledu na ovo osobstvo koje mi opažamo, kako bi to izgledalo ako se ovi koncepte eidetičke varijacije primjeni na ovo. Dakle, da se usložnjava se priča, dakle, usložnjava se dolaze nekakvi kategorijalni momenti i tako dalje. To nisam primijetio, to on će možda mene korigovati ako možda na nekom drugom mjestu on to radio. I sad posljednje, dann zuletzt, ich nehme zu viel Zeit in Anspruch hier, dann vielleicht das Wichtigste, also jetzt wieder zu Heidegger und zu diesem Ansatz bei der Zukunft, bei der Absenz, bei der Antizipation. Also, wenn wir bleiben bei dem konstitutiven Vorrang der Zukunft und nicht der Gegenwart, nicht der Präsenz. Also, wenn wir davon ausgehen, dass diese Prämisse, also von diesem konstitutiven Vorrang der Zukunft zustimmt, dann bleibt immer noch die Frage, ob sich auch kollektive Intentionalität mit diesem radikalen Zukunftskonzept, radikal, das heißt, Sein zum Tode, Sein zum Ende, also die ultimative Möglichkeit, in Einklang bringen lässt. Denn können die Kollektive, also die Kollektive, und ihre Intentionen aus diesem radikalen Sein zu Ende sich konstruieren. Bei Heidegger klingt das etwas solipsistisch, also wie ist das, wenn jetzt mehrere in einem Kollektiv ist, wie kann er sich aus seinem möglichen Ende sozusagen konstituieren, aus dieser Radikalität. Ja, wo ist das gegeben, dieses Phänomen? Das ist sehr fraglich. Also, bestimmt ein Kollektiv, wenn ich jetzt so karikieren darf. Dennoch, ich würde das bejahen, diese Möglichkeit. Jedoch nicht, indem ich, wie Heidegger das beim Dasein tut, die phänomenale Aufweise einer Todesgewissheit liefere, ja, sondern indem ich diese Annahme von diesem konstitutiven Form der Zukunft in gewisser Weise operationalisiere. Also, und wie tue ich das? Womit haben wir denn zu tun, wenn wir differenzieren zwischen verschiedenen kollektiven Intentionalitäten? Womit haben wir zu tun, wenn nicht mit der Differenzierung im Hinblick auf den Umgang mit dem gemeinsamen Sein können? Also schon wieder wie bei diesem, sagen wir, bedingt einzelnen Dasein, wenn die Kollektive sich sozusagen differenzieren. Ein Kollektiv ist eine geschäftliche Partnerschaft, die andere Kollektiv ist eine Liebesbeziehung. Hier geht es doch mit unterschiedlichem Bezug zur Zukunft, zu den eigenen Möglichkeiten. Und das heißt andere Modale sozusagen, die differenzieren aufgrund von den modalen Unterschieden, wie sich eine Partnerschaft, geschäftliche Partnerschaft bestimmt ganz genau die Möglichkeit, wenn etwas nicht stimmt, dann ist diese Partnerschaft zu Ende. Ja, wenn das antritt, dann ist das zu Ende oder dann wird das ausgebaut oder dann wird es genau sozusagen die Möglichkeit wird bestimmt. Sozusagen fast in Präsenz geholt, ja? Bei Liebesbeziehungen oder bei familiären Beziehungen und offenen Beziehungen ist das offen. Es mag kommen, was will, wir bleiben zusammen, zum Beispiel. Ja, das heißt, die Möglichkeit wird nicht so bestimmt, also dieses Feld, diese Welt der Möglichkeit, der Zukunftsbezug ist komplett offen. Nicht komplett, aber ja, aber doch anders als bei den geschäftlichen Beziehungen. Nur das als zwei Extreme zum Beispiel. Das heißt, wir haben hier einen konstitutiven Zukunftsbezug, wie ich das vom Heidegger ausgegangen habe. Und nicht irgendeinen Sinn für Liebesbeziehung und dann noch daneben einen Sinn für geschäftliche Beziehung. Also wenn ich jetzt karikiere, dann müsste ich das annehmen, wenn ich von der Selbstgegebenheit, von einem Selbst, das mir irgendwo in einem Sinn gegeben ist ursprünglich, dann müsste ich schon in diesem Gegebenheit schon diese Differenz irgendwo bestehen zwischen einem gegebenen, sozusagen, Gegebenheit einer geschäftlichen Beziehung und Gegebenheit einer Liebesbeziehung. Ja, wenn wir von kollektiven Intentionalität hingehen. Das heißt, das kann nicht ursprünglich sein. Okay, previše se dešava, previše sam vremena se, ali, dakle, evo uskratit ću dakle, konstitutivni primat budućnosti. Znači, zašto je, kako to da prenesemo onda na kolektivni intencionalitet, koji Heideggera tog nema, manje više nema, postoji onaj mit sein, ali ne postoji kolektivna intencionalnost u tom smislu. Dakle, kako sad taj radikalni odnos prema budućnosti koji je dat kod Heideggera u onom što on zove Dasein, odnos prema smrti, odnos prema toj ultimativnoj mogućnosti koja konstituiše sve ostale mogućnosti, kako to prenijeti na kolektiv i uopšte da li je to moguće prenijeti na kolektiv. Mislim da uopšte ne trebamo da sledimo taj put da pokazujemo fenomen, da nije nužno da pokazujemo da i kolektivi imaju nekakav odnos, radikalan odnos prema kraju, nego jednostavno operacionalizujem tu ideju i pokažem da, na primjer, ta naša mogućnost da razlikujemo između različitih intencija, različitih kolektiva, u stvari pokazuje da se kolektivi kroz te intencije različite odnose prema sopstvenim mogućnostima, prema sopstvenoj budućnosti, prema sopstvenim ciljevima i interesima. Jedna ljubavna veza se drugačije otvara prema budućnosti nego jedno poslovno partnerstvo. Dakle, konstitutivan je odnos prema tim mogućnostima. Poslovno partnerstvo određuje mogućnosti u budućnosti, znači on ih manje više definiše. Ako to ne ispuni se, onda se prekida poslovni odnos, dok ljubavni odnos, intimni odnos ili porodični odnos ili kakav god, ostavlja otvorene te mogućnosti. Naprimjer, su dosta mogućnosti neodređene, dakle postoji ovdje modalni, tako reći, razlika između koji se ovdje vidi prema odnošenju, prema sopstvenim interesima i prema sopstvenom svijetu, odnosno sopstvenim mogućnosti. I to je to. Izvinjavam se, tu nisam vremena. Antičan, kad sam to riječ.
Okay, our next speaker, Rastko.
It's very complicated, so I think if I get two more people talking, I will forget half of it. I mean, perhaps it's better if I answer directly. So I think initially, yes. So just one word of clarification, because I think the notion of metaphysics is of course very ambiguous, and when I was talking about how phenomenology might have metaphysical implications for the break, and when now we hear Heidegger accusing Husserl's phenomenology of having certain metaphysical presuppositions, and it's a very different notion of metaphysics. It's just that, just to avoid misunderstanding. So I guess the right way to understand this criticism is that Husserl's phenomenology, if you will, have certain implicit, tacit presuppositions coming from the history of philosophy that has not been sufficiently scrutinized. I mean, it has to do with that kind of criticism. Now, I think I would initially basically question part of your whole setup, because you kept saying that I had talked about self-perception and self-intuition, but I never used those terms. I talked about self-awareness. I did not talk about introspection. I did not talk about self-perception. So you seem to, you seem to be arguing that I and Husserl are really understanding self-awareness on the basis of perceptual acts. And I would just dispute that. I mean, that's a very classical criticism of Husserl, but I think the whole point of his investigation into self-consciousness, primarily as we find it in his investigations of inner time consciousness, is very much an effort of trying to, describe phenomenologically a dimension that is utterly different from the kind of act intentionality that he started out describing in the logical investigations. So initially I would say I just don't think it's correct, even though it is a classical criticism, and it's also a criticism that von Hermann, for instance, has been pushing. I really think it's a misunderstanding to view Husserl's investigations as basically just taking all the insights coming from this discussion of how do we perceive perceptual objects, and then using that to understand our the way in which we are aware of our own mind. So I would kind of dispute that part of the criticism. Then there is another criticism which might initially perhaps have more. There might be more to, which could be, well, even if it's not about Selbstanschauung, even if it's not about Selbstbeobachtung or self-introspection, perhaps there's still a privileging of presence, of the Urimpression. And is that not somehow falling? Is that not missing out on the importance of temporality? Is it not ignoring the importance of the future? So that could be a kind of somewhat different criticism. But here, of course, I would say, there is this extensive debate, between. So just to complicate matters, just consider the very different criticism that Husserl has been exposed to by Derrida on the one hand and Michel Henry on the other, because they are both. They are trying to push Husserl in two completely different directions when it comes to his notion of presence. So Derrida famously argued, a bit continuing the Heideggerian criticism, that Husserl was a physician of presence, that he was operating with a naive understanding of self-givenness, and that what a proper phenomenological account should recognize would be the priority of absence. Now then compare that to Michel Henry's criticism, who is the complete opposite. So Henry has been criticizing Husserl for putting too much emphasis on absence in his discussion of inner time consciousness. And Henry has basically argued that Husserl was never able to really capture the full self-presence of immanence because he kept understanding that self-presence in temporal terms, thereby introducing absence into the very structure of that presence. So there seems to be a disagreement within phenomenology about how exactly should we understand Husserl's reflections on these matters. And my own view would be that actually Husserl does recognize the equi-primordiality of presence and absence. And I really think that on his account, again, this was not something that I could at all address, but I have done that in one of my previous books. I think that for Husserl, self-consciousness really has to do with this presence-absence interplay. So there's no naive prioritization of a kind of uncontaminated presence, but nor is there a clear prioritization of absence, as if absence can explain presence. Rather, I think that Husserl wants to say that presence and absence goes together, and one way to understand that is to say, well, actually, if we take time seriously, then retention, protension, and primary impression have to kind of be thought at once. Now, that is, of course, not the same as to, I think there's still a difference between that view and Heidegger's view, because this is not to say that future is suddenly what is most important. So I'm not saying that there's no difference between Husserl and Heidegger, but I just want to say the idea that Husserl should just naively prioritize presence, I think it's just a misreading. So I do think that for him, actually, again, time and absence does actually play a role in this conceptualization of what this Selbstgegebenheit has to be understood as. And then I don't really, then there was this issue of categoriality, and I don't really see its relevance, because I don't think for Husserl, in his discussion of inner time consciousness, I don't think he would argue that that is somehow, that categorical intuition is somehow present in those very kind of basic passive structures. I don't think he would argue that. So I don't quite understand how. I don't know how to kind of reply to that. Except, of course, insofar as I would say that everything I have said and everything Husserl says about inner time consciousness is, of course, only the first step. Husserl would never say that everything important about selfhood and personhood can be captured through an investigation of the infrastructure of time consciousness. Just as I would never argue that everything worthwhile knowing about selfhood and personhood could be understood simply by focusing on the pre-reflexive self-consciousness or about the minimal self. This is only the starting point. There's a much, much richer story to be told, which Husserl also tells about, where he talks about how our personality is constituted through commitments to values and norms. It's constituted within an intersubjective horizon. And I think the moment you start considering those levels, of course the future will play a role as well. So like categorical structures. And then I think the final thing was this issue about whether Heidegger might be able to account for collective intentionality given his appeal to the importance of future. And I think you are right. He might be able to do that, but I couldn't quite understand why that was supposed to be a criticism. Because it's more like, one could say, initially it could be a criticism of Heidegger, that perhaps his whole model is not able to account for collective intentionality. Then you are arguing that actually, Seinkönig can also be understood collectively. But I just couldn't see why that would necessarily be a problem for anything I have been saying about, for instance, the importance of the face-to-face relationship. Because I think even if, you could of course say, if we go together, I go into the cinema, I sit next to somebody that I never met before, then we've seen the movie together, and actually, you know, we are somehow you know, infected by the good spirit of each other, so we end up actually enjoying the movie together, in the sense that I'm having an enjoyment that I wouldn't have had I just been all by myself. So this would be a very small, very brief kind of joint collective emotion. Now I say even that, of course, has a certain temporal structure. I mean, it's not entirely synchronic. Of course, there's a diachronic structure even to that collective, short-lived emotion. Now, whether it also necessarily involves plans, long-term plans for the future, I find kind of harder to really see. So again, I don't really know. I mean, I guess I still fail to understand why this reference to Seinkönig and future. I mean, why that should be an objection to anything I have said. And if the claim would be that each and every shared emotion necessarily has to incorporate long-term future plans, then I would say I just don't find that convincing. I mean, I think there can be very short-term dyadic interactions that might also give rise to certain shared experiences, and I mean, they still have a temporal structure, but I don't think they have necessarily kind of larger scope. And I'm sure we could discuss this for the next 2 days as well.
Ja, es ist so viel. Ich hätte noch einiges zu sagen, aber lassen wir das jetzt. So viel Zeit in der Stunde. Ja.
Okay.
So, I would like first to mention that without bodily experience, we cannot establish that in fact pre-reflective self-awareness genuinely exists. For example, if someone asked me today whether I have been drinking water or writing on my Mac or listening to the discussion, my answer is based on a clear sense of what I have been doing. And that is, I think, the only argument that phenomenology can give us in favor of pre-reflective self-awareness. But then it is clear that pre-reflective self-awareness is non-objectual, non-objectifying, non-observational, non-thematic, non-conceptual, and so on. But if we think this sense of us as sense of agency, then that is the sense that I am the one who is causing an action. For example, that I am the one who, as your colleague Gallagher said once, who is generating a certain thought in my stream of consciousness. Then we could see clearly the distinction between, let's say, feeling of agency and judgment of agency. That is between pre-reflective self-awareness, which is based on sensory motor processes, and reflective self-awareness, or belief-like processes. That's why I believe that you have the right in criticizing Schmid's introduction of normativity and his notion of plural pre-reflective self-awareness. For sure, it's not plausible at all how Schmid can successfully defend his thesis that, I quote him, plural self-awareness is the normative pressure that drives us towards a unified shared perspective with a coherent set of attitudes that commit us jointly. Especially if plural pre-reflective self-awareness is also based on sensory motor processes. As I already mentioned, I'm working with him at the University of Vienna on my thesis of a constitutive account of group agency. And I believe that only a constitutive account can help us to a proper understanding of group agency or collective intentionality. Because groups are constituted by normative principles and entertaining normative relations to others. At least that is true for large groups, corporations, universities, political parties, and so on. Institutions need a normative identity that underlies their practices. For example, a decision to launch a company, establish a cartel, found a university, found an institute, are all examples of forming a group agent. And I think that Bernhard Schmid tied his notion of plural pre-reflective self-awareness more to the way in which Margaret Gill is doing her social ontology that is more to the notion of joint commitment and to the small dyadic groups. But if one bases social ontology on the analysis of joint commitment within small groups, one cannot show the experiential fact, and that is sehr wichtig, that we can still identify with a group even when we have reason to criticize its ways of acting. Social reality often entails that we are members of particular groups, but in doing so, we have to ask ourselves whether this makes sense, not only from the perspective of us as part of a group agent, but also from our individual perspective. You're sure acquainted with how Edith Stein began with the analysis of Einfühlung and ended in the Abteilung Individuum und Gemeinschaft in her Beiträge zur philosophischen Begründung der Philosophie und der Geisteswissenschaft with the analysis of leaders of groups with some kind of authoritarian social ontology. And I quote her: Das Vorhandensein einer Führerschaft aber ist konstitutiv für die Gemeinschaft. Ein einziger starker Führer kann ausreichen, eine Gemeinschaft zusammenzuhalten. So, I don't think that Schmid's notion of plural subjects could comprehend this, or Gurwich's objection that Einfühlung isn't enough for properly describing this sense of us, which also entails different kinds of hospitality, and you mentioned that yesterday at your talk. So to summarize, Schmid's concept of plural effective self-awareness is more suitable for small, dyadic joint commitment groups than to large groups which are also and maybe essentially constructed through group agents, normative self-understanding, self-conception, and through founding legal acts and documents. Thank you.
Okay, and third speaker, Igor Cvetić.
I have three questions. First question is a little bit general about your understanding of other directedness in empathy, and in the same framework I will have the second question that is directly from one problem in the text. So I'm kind of here from perspective about effective intentionality sui generis, defended today mostly by Peter Golding, Zahavi, Bernhard, and so on. You use this term intentionality sui generis, referring, for example, to Einstein. So I looked in your text and trying to find, except you explaining that it is in some way so, what is the specific mark of this intentionality? Why is it sui generis? For example, they use, it's most obvious that how something is felt constitutes intentionality over the growth or the situation that is most obvious thing that they use, but also that this affecting intentionality is direct to practically having direct engagement over the world and so on. I think this kind of notions are very important also when you refer to Husserl speak about affectivity, motivation and life and so on. But where I was a bit confused and you followed Husserl and go back to the perception in the question of empathy and other directness. So my question is, would you say that this kind of perception would rather be some cognitive part of it, but there is something irreducible to it in a part when we speak about motivation and different kinds of empathy, let's say when we are recognizing other, having perception of other, but being probably passive, and in other cases when we have some Mitspiel with others, so mutual play with others, when there is motivation and so on. My second question related to the text, again, think about affective self-awareness, most of the time by Jan Slaby. What is important for example, for Peter Goldie is important integration of assessment phenomenal consciousness in feeling theory, and so that phenomenal consciousness actually constitutes and is constituted for the intentional content. And by Slaby more concretely, when he speaks about affective self-awareness, it is important that it's in the same time not able to differentiate these movements it is the consciousness of the object and of the world. For example, when I'm afraid of something, it is not only accompanied by feeling myself vulnerable, but being afraid of something, it's constituted by feeling myself vulnerable. And we cannot differentiate the part, so we have affective self-awareness in the same time feel myself have some relative self-awareness and having objective directness to the world some way. So my question is related to this fourth requirement difference condition. It is not general problem. This is not problem with your objection to the Schmid, but I probably, in this perspective, I'm a little confused how easy the object and the correct question of object directness has just disappeared in some moment, and we are passionate about relation of emotion and experience and awareness of it, as you did. But if you put this another way, when Kraljice speak about object, of course he almost always means situation. When we have some affective prerogative, self-awareness, we are, it is dependent from the situation we are in, and then he spoke about feelings as atmosphere. I don't think it's a general critique of your thesis. I think it could be very in line with your argument, but I just needed some better argument how the object or situation disappeared in this great question. And my third very short comment, I was actually inspired with something you and said yesterday on the lecture, and something that we are working here. We spoke about situation, how empathy became social acts, and that the important thing for it is that someone other is consciousness that I'm looking at him, that I'm loving him, and so on. So why I'm asking here, because our specific problems working with social ontology, but also with social changes and so on, is this intersubjective relation. But when someone is not here, or when we have to mobilize, invite someone and make intersubjective relation with wide range of people. So could this argument be used on that sense? So what we are making with we are socially engaged, we are inviting others to be consciousness of our engagement, to invite them, and changing ourselves on how they react to our engagement and so on. Just thank you.
Okay, now it's time for Mr. Zahavi to answer.
Okay, so perhaps just a few comments to the first speaker. So this idea, I'm not in disagreement about the importance of embodiment at all, and I mean the reason why it might not have featured so prominently in my Self and Other book as in some of my previous books was not because I kind of somehow dropped the idea that embodiment is important, but as I point out in one section, I'm trying to present the notion of the minimal self in a way that remains somewhat neutral to the embodiment question, in the hope of making the argument appealing also to people who might be aversive to a strong embodiment claim. So it was, if you will, out of certain strategic reasons that embodiment just doesn't play such an important, it doesn't feature very prominently in my most recent book, but it's not because I in any way would deny the importance of embodiment for experience and self-consciousness. Then you very briefly mentioned that the only argument one might give as a phenomenologist for the existence of preflexive self-awareness was this ability to somehow recall what one had been doing in the past. And I guess, this is partly the argument you can also find in Sartre. The claim would be, well, had I not been aware of it when it happened, I would not be able to recall it subsequently. And I think that's one argument, but I'm not sure, just as brief remark. I'm not sure it's the only argument, because another argument that I think one should also use is a kind of an indirect argument, basically an argument via elimination, where the point would be that we need, and of course you could question, there might be a methodological question here whether this is really a phenomenological argument or whether it's more like an argument phenomenologists could also use, but perhaps it's not really a phenomenological argument. But an argument by elimination where the point would simply be that all the other accounts of self-awareness fail. So you cannot construe, so this is part of what the whole, as I presented earlier today, the whole criticism of reflection theory. The idea is to say, well, we need something like pre-reflexive self-awareness if reflection is to be possible, because reflection cannot kind of ground itself. And I think this is also kind of an argument for the existence of pre-reflexive self-awareness, which is very different from the argument you were making. So I think there might be different, there might be kind of different strategies one could pursue, and I'm not sure that the argument by memory is the only one available. Then, then there was this question. So again, before coming then to the main issue about agency, I just want to mention one thing apropos your reference to Stein and the importance of the Führer. It's a bit strange, but there must have been something alive in those years, because Goebbels actually also has a somewhat strange discussion in the very final part of the book that I was referencing yesterday, which concerns what he calls fusional or charismatic groups. And so I only mentioned two kinds of groups, partnership and community, but he actually mentions the third kind, which is this group that is somehow centered around a charismatic leader, and where primarily, what I think you have in mind is some kind of sect, basically, where you basically give up your identity to become a member of this sect, and you somehow, your kind of experiences are very much orchestrated around, the message of this charismatic leader. And again, I think when you read those texts today, it seems a little bit odd, because this would not, you can understand the difference between community and society, or partnership and community, but are fusional groups on the same fundamental level, or is it not a very strange, rare occasion? And again, I think perhaps one possible reason for Goebbels' inclusion, again, just like Stein, is that there might have been certain political movements going on in Germany at that time that just made it more relevant to somehow include that kind of information in their analysis. Now then the final issue was this issue about group agency, and I can see why. So here's, I guess, one way to reply. If we exclusively understand, re-intentionality in terms of group agency, then I can kind of better, understand why there are these references to, the importance of coherence and the importance of normativity. But I guess I would have a problem with defining we's exclusively as agents. Why not talk about patience, group patience? So why is there not a passive dimension to groups as well? And again, this is a constant example with us enjoying a movie together, or us enjoying a sunset together. I don't see why that should not qualify as a shared experience, even though we're not doing something, we're not trying to accomplish something. So I think a comprehensive account of we experiences, I think it has really been a major problem that most discussions in recent literature has been so narrowly focusing on action, rather than precisely taking affectivity and emotionality seriously. And then you could say, given that I think Schmid would be on board with that, in the sense that he's also very interested in emotional experiences, I again find it a bit perplexing that he then wants to put so much emphasis on normativity, because again you would say, if you can move out of the domain of agency to also factor in affectivity, which I think he is kind of prepared to acknowledge, well, why then insist on the importance of normativity? And I just don't fully understand that choice. And then I think, well, as you said, we might need very different analysis when it comes to small groups, recently corporations. But I mean, as far as I know, Schmid has recently been talking about kind of bigger corporations. I mean, there are these examples he keeps giving about, General Motors regretting, their past environmental policy. So here's Coca-Cola regretting that this and that. So he has had these examples with big corporations. So I don't know. I assume that he's, but you will know better, but that he is actually working on bigger groups as well, and not just on the kind of small groups that are commitments. So I think that's
That was a critical Schmid, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't agree together, but we work together.
Yeah, that's good. I'm happy to learn that is possible. Okay, so I'm not sure I got the second question, unfortunately, but the first question was this issue of, if I understood it correctly, to what extent can empathy be classified as a sui generis act when perception somehow seems to be preconditioned?
Is it crucial perception, or is it crucial something that is sui generis emotional?
Okay, but I think my way, the way I kind of presented in some of my articles at least, the claim would be that empathy both shares certain features with perception, but it's also different in certain ways from perception. Again, so here's why. If you are familiar with this very classical Husserlian distinction between different modes of intentionality, so you can think about the Eiffel Tower, you can see a photo of the Eiffel Tower, and you can stand in front of the Eiffel Tower. These are three different ways of intending the very same object: signative intention, pictorial intention, and perception. Again, a very kind of classical structure, and the question is then, where should we fit empathy in there? Is it more like kind of signative intention, is more like a kind of pictorial intention, or is it more like kind of perceptual intention? And my argument would then be that, I think there are important differences, but if we have to choose between one of those three, I think empathy has most in common with perception. Why is that? Because I think one of the classical arguments that Husserl provides for the primacy of perception when it comes to act intentionality is that perception gives us the object itself in the most kind of primordial way. Whereas if you are looking at a picture, there are certain ways in which we can kind of come closer to the object. Whereas when we're looking at we're standing in front of the object, it's a bit hard to see, well, how could we get closer to it? Except perhaps if we were practically engaging with the object, which would be Heidegger's argument. And then the claim would then be, when it comes to empathy for Husserl, I think, is the most, again, there's certain ambiguities in this account that I'm also kind of sketching out in my book, but you can contrast empathy as a way of understanding others with much more influential ways of understanding others. And one example I have is, imagine that you're visiting your friend, he's not at home, you enter his office, and then you see that all his letters from his ex-wife have been torn to pieces and spread around the whole room. And you infer, my friend is probably, my friend is upset about his divorce. So this is one way of coming to understand the other. It's a very influential, indirect way. And then contrast that with you sitting in front of your friend, you're talking about the divorce and suddenly he starts crying and you then have an understanding of him being distressed about his divorce. Now I think the latter for Husserl would be a case of empathy, and the claim would be that that is the most direct way you can kind of come to grasp the other's distress. It's a much more direct way than inferring that he's distressed because you see all the torn letters. So that's what makes empathy kind of more perception-like. But there are of course also important differences. I mean, and one important difference is that empathy, there's this elusiveness, this alterity in empathy. So empathy does provide us with an understanding of the other, but it's a way that also preserves the otherness of the other, because we can never grasp the experience of the other in the same way as that experience is given to the other. So there's always that feature of empathy, which is different from perception. So I think the claim would be, well, I mean, perception might have something in common with empathy. Empathy might have something in common with perception, but can certainly not be reduced to perception, and it cannot be accounted for by having perception plus something else. So I don't think it's possible to kind of reductively explain empathy either. And the only question one could then still ask was, assume that you were blind and deaf, and imagine that all your perceptual abilities you were deprived of them. Would you then be able to empathize with somebody else? I would say no, because you cannot, engage in a face-to-face interaction with somebody else if you have no sensory faculties left. So that perhaps seems to suggest that even if empathy is irreducible, it still has perception as a certain precondition. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, at least that could be one argument for concluding like that. So that was the first thing. The last question had to do, if I understood correctly, had to do with this question of whether some of the insights coming from discussion of the relationship between empathy and social acts, where the social acts entail bidirectionality and kind of mutual reciprocity and some kind of recognition, whether that model could be expanded to also include interaction with groups or people who were absent, so can it kind of be scaled up. And I guess I think I would want to say that there are certainly differences here. I mean, I don't think one can just scale it up so that it can be applied without any change to those situations as well. I mean, for once, so imagine, for instance, I think this is an example that I read once, I don't remember where. So imagine that you are the US president and you somehow sign a law giving equal rights to all Americans despite their skin color. So that could be seen as a certain recognition of, certain groups. Now, well, even if that's a recognition, I mean, if you're doing that in your office, I mean, there would be a lot of feedback from the addressees that will not be available to you, which just, I think, makes the situation very different from what happens in a face-to-face encounter, where there is this constant, calibration. I'm doing something, you're reacting, that is influencing me, vice versa. I mean, you just don't have this forth and back, I mean, in these other situations. So I think there are clear differences. But I don't think that is to say that an investigation of these larger scale situations should completely dispense with the small case scenarios, because I think it would be very unlikely that you would be able to engage in large-scale acts of recognition had you not been exposed to and engaged in and involved in the small-scale one. So I think we acquire certain capacities and certain, interpersonal forms of understanding in those dyadic, triadic, small group encounters that we are drawing on when we want to engage in large scale listening. So that's why I think I would kind of, I think I would want to say that we have to recognize the difference, but I would also want to say that the small scale is a certain condition of possibility for the large scale. So I think there's a founding relationship. And I just couldn't understand the second question about how it disappeared.
In just one sentence, my question: if the self-awareness presupposes dependence, some interdependence with the situation, then one could argue that the plural self-awareness is considered by the same situation we are in. I think that you could also, that there could be a good argument for yourself, but probably that here is, for me, a little understandable how easy this problem that they are in a same situation or that we can same object easily disappear.
Okay, yeah, no, but I think that's, now I understand much better. So I think that I would want to say, this is also something I've said. I mean, it's one thing to argue that self-awareness is not, objectifying in the sense that the experience in question is taking itself as an object in order to be given. So it's one thing to say that, but that is not to deny that there might be objects or situations present in order for self-awareness to occur. Because I mean, what we have to remember is what kind of experiences is it in the first place that are self-aware? And these are typically intentional experiences. So I mean, it's my perception of the bottle that is self-aware, and there wouldn't be a perception of the bottle if there were not an object for that perception to hook onto. So I'm not. So all this talk about pre-reflective self-consciousness being non-objectifying is not supposed to entail that there's not a world relation that is absolutely crucial for self-awareness to occur. And again, I think it's a misreading to somehow say, if you talk about pre-reflective self-awareness, then we are cutting the link to the world and retreating into some kind of hermetically closed subjective sphere. That's not at all the argument. Of course, I would want to say we are world embedded, we are characterized by the Weltsein sign, but that goes hand in hand with this non-objectifying form of self-consciousness. And I think one could say something similar about plural self-consciousness, because I think this it's actually a point that Schmid has highlighted, but which you can also find actually already pointed out by Schütz. So what Schütz says on some occasions is that a we experience is primarily to be found, is primarily pre-reflective in nature, in the sense that it's not something with timothize. So what does he mean by that? I think one way to understand it is, if we are standing in a dyadic relation where we're kind of paying attention to each other, this is actually somewhat of an anomaly. Because normally when we are enjoying something together or doing something together, our focus is not on each other, our focus is on the shared context. And so Schütz says that the moment we start to reflect upon the real relationship, we are actually already leaving it. Then we are kind of, we're not any longer engaged in it. And I think, so I guess what this highlights is this issue about, whether we relationships should primarily be viewed as dyadic or as triadic. And I think I would agree. I mean, they are triadic, but the point I just want to make, and I think this is a difference to Schmid, is that I only think those kinds of triadic re-relations are possible on the basis of certain dyadic interpersonal relations, whereas he seemed to say, forget about the dyadic relationship, because social cognition, interpersonal understanding, I-DAO relationship is just a red herring. It's not going to help us understand the nature of re-intentionality, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, I think the reason why we can engage in these specific triadic interactions very much has to do with specific processes playing itself out in the diagonal relation.
Thanks. Thanks for the lectures. As I said, I'm a sociologist, so my questions will be somewhat directed from my discipline, although I think that phenomenology and sociology, of course, have had a great influence on each other during the constitutive period and also later. So I'll just firstly like to consider some epistemological implications of your social ontology. Namely, coming from a pragmatist tradition, I'm very much inclined to agree both with your skepticism regarding those types of accounts of intentionality that advocate some sort of, as you call it, or more precisely as Schmid called it, phenomenal fusion, as well with your proposition that following Husserl, we must preserve plurality within our sense of togetherness. However, I was wondering in which way does your defense of plurality influence our efforts, efforts of social scientists to understand social reality, especially sociologists, because of this relation that is well documented and here for us. So, for example, if we experience oneself as one of us thanks to our everyday social interactions, then scientific explanation, phenomenologically founded scientific explanation, would have to, if we follow the example of Schutz, for example, would have to take seriously common sense understanding and cannot reject as easily as, for example, positivism can, common sense norms or common sense intersubjectivity, culturally given common sense, categories. So, furthermore, does this plurality mean that in order to scientifically understand collective action, I must in some way follow theoretical cues from Schutz, from Goffman, from Garfinkel, and study the way in which institutions are reproduced in concrete everyday situation, particularistic everyday situation. And this, I think, raises some old questions and old skepticism regarding phenomenological sociology, which is basically methodological individualism. That is, we cannot consider, for example, power relations in the emergence of institutions, of large structures of re-intentionality, as one might call it. And the second question, and sorry for asking like 5 times the same questions perhaps, but is, if you see that this question was answered, you can skip it. But it also is about the intersubjectivity of social change. So let me start with a quote from your paper in which you explain Husserl's take on communicative engagement. There you say, I think Igor was also speaking about this. Both of us, you and I, look at each other in the eyes. You understand me, he's aware of me, just as I am simultaneously aware of you. I then address you and seek to influence you. For instance, I might call your attention to a common object by pointing at it. If successful, your attention will shift from my expression to the intended object. In this way, my intention is realized in you. So you paraphrase Husserl, but so I was just trying to make, perhaps, to clarify or to explicitly ask the following question. Can this attention to object be directed at something that is negative? For example, can I say, look at that injustice, look at that bad practice, socially constructed bad practice? And could that act of engagement then constitute a new kind of institution that would bring some kind of radical change that would go beyond the given concrete social, cultural facts that are commonsensically understood? So Okay, so that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Madam Kulic is the next.
Thanks. Well, my questions basically elaborate a bit on Srđan's questions. I'm also a sociologist, and I'm also very much interested in your view on the logic of social change and social dynamics. So I would like to keep focusing on the problem of communication, and I'd like to ask, what would be your positioning with respect to Schmid's argument, namely the one that communicative action cannot establish shared meanings because it has to rest upon the more fundamental plural pre-reflexive self-awareness. So basically I understand that this is a indirect criticism of Habermas and his notion that communicative action can generate radically new meanings, basically, and that the logic of social change and historical progress is the one of gradual expansion of.
So just to be sure I understood, when you said that this was a criticism of Habermas, do you mean Schmid's position?
Schmid's, of course. Then my question is, what is your position with respect to Schmid's argument? So so basically, Habermas's argument is that over the course of history, more and more aspects of social reality become transformed on the basis of communicative action, this communicative reason, primarily the political system, which becomes more rational, more reasonable, more prone to questioning. Now, let me just try to expand a bit on this, because there is the so-called third generation critical theory, namely Axel Honneth primarily, but also some other authors who have tried to go beyond Habermas and argue that there is some kind of, to try to expand this conception of social change by arguing that there is such thing as a normative surplus in social reality, or rather a semantic surplus of institutionalized norms of action, and that the way progressive social change or any kind of social change occurs is by way of actors experiencing the existing institutional order as unjust or as insufficient in any respect, and then on the basis of this experience developing what he calls a shared semantics, a kind of new vocabulary which would enable individual actors to basically develop a shared orientation, a shared normative orientation, and then try to institutionalize their new viewpoint within the institutional system. Now, when I think of Honneth's perspective in light of Schmid's and your arguments, it seems to me that the concept of experiential sharing becomes very important. So, in a way, Honneth would be in agreement with Schmid more than Habermas, that it is the pre-discursive experience of injustice that is the key factor behind social change. But then there is the question, how does this experience of injustice translate into normative claims? There seems to be a missing link there, because if we presuppose that linguistic communication cannot generate radically new meanings, shared meanings, then we have to locate the normative, let's say, innovation within the realm of experience. Now this becomes much closer to some strands of neo-pragmatism, for example, to Richard Rorty, who argues that the way social change occurs is that individual actors start using radically new linguistic terms, and this is the result of some idiosyncratic factors, and then gradually their language starts to resonate with the language of other actors, some other actors, and there is no general theory of how this happens, but people start speaking the way this first actor had started to speak, and this is how what he calls metaphors or radically new terms become literalized, become routinized, and become generalized within existing social reality. Now, my question to you is, first of all, the first question was, what is your relation to Schmid's argument about the epiphenomenal nature of communication? The second would be then, how do you see these attempts to theorize the normative surplus and experience of injustice, and what would be your position on that? Thanks.
That's all.
I'm
sorry.
First of all, I want to say that I agree with the basic trust of Schmid. I believe that it is misguided to put pre-awareness before singular awareness. But I do think that some points that you're criticizing in Schmid can actually make some sense. So I'd like to suggest how I can see that they make sense, and just to hear your thoughts on this. So first of all, the phenomenal vision, I think in some cases it can actually be a good way to describe certain situations. Because, for example, I think that the concept, for example, is maybe not a good one. The better example would be a group of friends talking, interacting together, having a good time, enjoying themselves. And because this situation actually consists of many individual acts, individual ideal relations that are, and exchanges that are actually, let's say that they're somehow fused together, many interchanges are happening that create some sort of singular mood in which all are participating in their own individual ways. So this is kind of the way I can understand this phenomenal fusion. And the other thing is I can also understand how a pre-reflective, Schmid's comparison of plural pre-reflective self-awareness and singular, how they can work in a similar way. Because I'd say let's take the situation of a group of friends. We are reflecting aware of each other. We are not reflecting on ourselves as a group. But this experience where during which we are reflectively aware of each other, of ourselves, makes it possible to later reflect upon it. So this lived experience actually makes it possible, it enables us to reflect and to say we really had fun that day and so on. So this, I would like to, I wouldn't go further in stressing the similarities between plural and singular case. This is the first question, so what are your thoughts on this? And the second is, what I find interesting when I think about these topics is how many various forms of intentionality there are actually, and how many different ways that intentionality is constituted there are. So there are some that are that require a feeling of togetherness, some that don't require a feeling of togetherness, just need a shared common goal or instrumental rationality or a joint commitment, but not this emotional bonding, and so on and so on. So we have very different ways to connect as a group, form a group, and this maybe, and this is what I would like to ask, maybe there are many ways that we empathize. Maybe there are different kinds of empathy, different ways to empathize, so I would like to hear what you think about that. So maybe I'm empathizing in a different way with a member of my family than with somebody I barely know. I'm not sure. I would like to hear your opinion on this. And then maybe we should also take into account the temporal dimension when they're making these distinctions. So in the example with mother and father, their common past, the entire past life they had together actually enables them to share, to have this experiential sharing. While on the other hand, the example with concept goal, we don't, I wouldn't even say that we have experiential sharing in this strong sense, maybe between performance. I could understand how the performers of the concert could have this joint emotion, this emotional sharing, but the audience, this seems more as an aggregate of many similar experiences and plus emotional contagion. So that's about the power dimension question, and finally another element that I would like to hear your opinion about is what about these social groups that are circulating within a community, and how these they can actually affect the way we immediately react to a person who immediately form the ideal relation. Actually, for example, I can immediately form a different. I can immediately perceive a person in a particular way, pre-reflectively based, for example, on what the person is wearing. So there is some sort of immediacy here, but it's not empathy. It's not an element that's coming from empathy, but from community. So how, but it can in fact influence the way I empathize or the way I form this ideal relation. Okay, so these are my questions.
Yeah. So I think I will start with the last one and then move to the more sociological subsequently. So I think just to make it clear, when Schmid is talking about phenomenological fusion, he's not talking about a state where there's no longer a differentiation. So he has, even though you might think that that is actually what he has in mind, but he's very explicit about that not being what he means. And so on some occasions he has also said, that a we is necessarily something with kind of plural owners. I mean, so he completely rejects the idea that a we is a kind of bigger scale I. So it does preserve plurality. So he's completely on board with that. Then of course you might wonder, well, if that's what he means, is it not a little bit unfortunate to use the term phenomenological fusion? I mean, because fusion seems to indicate that there is no longer any differentiation. But this is really, I think, it's more a terminological choice. And so I would agree with you, the example you gave. Of course we can be together in ways that there's a plurality preserved, but we are really experiencing and doing it together. And I mean, I think that's obviously a phenomenon we need to accommodate, and not just deny the existence of. Then you of course also right in saying that one merit of the notion of reflective plural self-awareness would be that it precedes reflective plural self-awareness, and that would be one of the areas where it would clearly resonate with the discussion of plural pre-reflective self-awareness. So I'm of course not denying that, but the question is just, whether that similarity is sufficient to make all the claims that Schmid is also making when he, for instance, says that pre-reflective self-awareness has the same role in constituting the unity of the mind in the singular and in the plural case, because this is, I think, a much stronger claim than just pointing to this distinction between the pre-reflective and the reflective. So again, it has to do with this, does the differences outweigh the similarities, and how should we view that? Then there was this question of whether there are different forms of togetherness. Perhaps one way to think about it would be to say when Walter talks about Gefühl der Zusammengehörigkeit, so Gerwig at least very much took that to be, very much took that to involve an emphasis on the Gefühl. So it's really supposed to be a specific added emotion. But perhaps one could, use or interpret Walter in a way that where the focus not so much on the Gefühl, but rather on the togetherness, so that it could be, that one could talk of it not as a feeling of togetherness, but perhaps more as a sense of togetherness. And if you do that, then I'm not sure that it's that easy to find counterexamples of group formations that does not include it. Because you mentioned, say, joint commitment, but I don't really understand what a joint commitment is if it lacks this sense of togetherness.
Based on some power that we are all
yeah, but then I just wonder whether, but then I don't know, but then it's just, I think it's important to differentiate between, us doing something in parallel, which kind of follows the same goal. So again, what do I know? I have been convinced that in order to be healthy, I have to run 20 kilometers every day and eat a special kind of food. And, 10,000 other people in Denmark have been convinced by the same slogan, so they are also running every morning and eating the same kind of food. So we are all kind of following the same norm. And I don't think this is a joint commitment in any interesting sense of the term, because it's not, it's just kind of per accident that we are doing this in parallel. And so this would not, I think, be a good example of something we are collectively doing. Whereas I think those cases where we are collectively doing something, I think this sense of togetherness, perhaps you can come up with an example. Prima facie, I would assume that it actually does play an important role. But of course, that is not to say that there are not important differences as well. And I think this issue of whether we empathize differently with family members or in-group members is certainly important. And I think but I have two things to it. So one question is, well, what exactly do we mean by empathy? Because if you by empathy mean compassion and sympathy, which is how it's often used, well, then I think it's clear that we have biases, positive biases vis-a-vis family members and in-group members. There's a lot of social psychology literature to indicate that. So that's kind of uncontroversial. But what if we opt for this this more deflationary notion of empathy, which has to do with understanding expressions or grasping the psychological meaning of expressions? So are there also differences here? And that seems to be the case. It seems to be the case that we actually have an easier time decoding or deciphering the emotional expressions of in-group members vis-a-vis out-group members. I guess it's probably the same for them as well. So I guess there's nothing kind of politically incorrect in saying it, but perhaps you could just point out that most of us have an easier time perhaps distinguishing individuals from our own ethnic surroundings than simply being able to discriminate, Asians or Africans. Sometimes anyway, it seems to have somehow be harder. But,
I just wanted to add that I was telling you this before, like a month ago. There is a number of experiments done by now I'm missing the name, Andrews. She has two names on the development of recognition of facial expressions in infants. So the results show that the infants start to recognize facial expressions initially, first in their mom, and only when it comes together in all modalities, like when the kid sees the mom, hears the mom, when mom touches the kid, and only later on the kid starts to be able to differentiate the facial expression only by singular modality. So when the kid sees mom smiling but no touching, no vocalizations. So it goes along these lines. So it's not really that weird then that we can actually recognize quickly facial expressions of the in-group. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the only thing, there were two things more that I have to move on. So one thing is that there's also another, way of talking about empathy that again I've used in my book, where I'm making this distinction between the that, the what, and the why. So what is that supposed to mean? So what I'm trying to appeal to is the idea that, in some cases we might, so first the what and the why. There's a clear difference between recognizing that another person is sad or angry or fearful and recognizing why the other person is sad, angry or fearful. And obviously, I mean, there are many situations where we realize the first without yet having any clue about the second level. And I think for many of the terminology, I mean, some of the terminology would say, well, these are two different levels of empathy. I mean, there's one level that basically has to do with this recognition of what kind of state you are in, and then there's a kind of a richer notion that includes an understanding of why you are in the state. And again, I want to understand why, we need an understanding of the context, of what follows, etc., and what comes after. But you could potentially also argue for a distinction between what and that, where the claim would be, in some cases, we might think, well, I recognize that you are sad, and then subsequently I realize, well, actually you were not sad, you were just, I don't know, nostalgic, or perhaps you were just absent-minded. So I might have been wrong in assigning the specific emotional state to you, I mean, let alone explaining why you were in that state. But even in those cases, I mean, even when I misattribute a specific emotional state to you, I'm typically completely correct in ascribing mindedness to you. So I mean, so to put differently, where do I might misattribute specific emotional states to people with minds. I don't misattribute specific mental states to bottles. I mean, so even in those cases where I might be wrong about what state you are in, I'm typically correct about you being in some kind of state in the first place. And I think the only cases where we might be wrong about this would be, for instance, if we go into a panopticon and see, Madame Tussauds, and you think this is a statue and it's actually a guard or vice versa. So there are, of course, some limit situations where we might be wrong even on that, but it's very rare. And so the question would be, if this is the most elementary level of empathy, which if you want to kind of have a kind of psychological or natural scientific explanation, would probably be linked up with a certain understanding of animacy and perhaps biological movement. Then, of course, the question would be, is that also culturally specific? Is it also the case that there are in-group, out-group differences even on that most fundamental level? I'm a little bit less certain about that, but at least it's worth considering. And then the very final thing was this about typification. So I think I would turn what you were saying, I would use the term typification. So often when we encounter people, we might judge them on the basis of their dress. And I think this just, I think Schütz has done a lot of work there. I mean, showing how, of course, in our interaction with all kinds of people, we very soon move beyond the dyadic relation, and we are drawing on certain types and typifications that facilitate our social engagement. So, in what way? Well, in the way that it's not every time I meet somebody, every time I meet a new person, I so to speak do not have to start from scratch. I mean, so if I meet a new person, say in an academic context, there are all kinds of presuppositions involved that facilitates my engagement with him or her. And of course, sometimes I might be wrong, but often it actually helps a lot. And I think that this role of typification, I think, is also very important to factor in when you want to understand something like empathy. Okay, then, so the reason why I started with last is that I have most to say about that. So because it's not just you coming from different disciplines, it's also me trying to struggle with saying anything reasonable. So I think for the first, so I think I had two comments vis-a-vis your question. So I think that I think there is a difference between saying that we also need to investigate kind of micro sociological structures. That there is an importance to that. There's a difference between insisting on that and claiming that any kind of sociological phenomenon can kind of be understood on the basis of those investigations. And so I think, I mean, it seems reasonable to say if you want to understand kind of, power hierarchies, it might be difficult to see how very concrete encounters can kind of illustrate that. So I think we might need diverse models, but what I will probably keep insisting on is not only that, that the respect for the difference goes both ways. So it's not just about people interested in these micro sociological phenomena, respecting that there might be kind of macro structures that needs other tools, but of course I would also insist that the respect has to go the other way, so you shouldn't think that whatever tools you're using to investigate these bigger formations can without further ado fully explain anything that is worth knowing about in the micro case. That's the first thing. The other thing is that I would actually have a hard time, I would find it very dubious that one could really do an exhaustive and kind of investigation of the macrostructures without some knowledge about the microstructures. Because I mean, if what we are talking about are people and individuals who are affected in all kinds of ways by discourses of power, what have you, I mean, insofar as we are talking about individuals, well, then we also have to understand how individuals are experiencing themselves and experiencing others. And I don't think an explanation merely dealing with these higher levels can do that without also consulting the which is, I guess, not a very surprising. I mean, you could have anticipated that I would say something like that, I guess. And then the other thing I want to say was this issue about, I mean, the quote you were referencing from Husserl, because I think what he has in mind there, I mean, is really, I think actually what he's delivering there is a kind of before the, it's actually a very, I think, clear example of what psychologists would classify as the move from dyadic attention to triadic attention. I think that's basically what he's describing. And I don't think you can, without further ado, take that very basic structure and then talk about how social change might occur. Because I mean, again, he's just interested in, well, how do we kind of shift attention from attention focusing between us to an external object? I think if you want to have societal change and people pay attention to injustice, I just think this is such a bigger story. I mean, and we need values, and I think so. I really don't think you can just scale it up. I mean, I think we need a completely different set of tools. I have to say. Then there was the other question. Just quickly look. So I guess one question one could ask vis-a-vis Schmid's view that any communication basically presupposes, a shared ground. But that one could wonder, well, if that's the model you're committed to, well, I mean, where does change occur? Where does new ideas occur? Where does new group formations occur? Because it all somehow seems to be presupposed from the very outset, and that somehow does not strike me as a very appealing theory, because, I mean, why should we not allow for, again, all kinds of group formations to occur on the basis of both disagreements and agreements about a common ground. So I think there's something, you could say, something slightly static about the model that Schmid seems to be attracted by. And so to say the communication really has a certain epiphenomenal status, I think it's also, so I don't know whether he would actually accept having that label pinned onto him, but I would say, I would find such a view very implausible as well, because I think even if I want to argue that at least pre-linguistic communication and pre-linguistic interaction has a very, very important role to play. So I also think we should be prepared to accept that the moment linguistic communication enters the picture, again, everything gets so much more complex and sophisticated. And to say that this is just a kind of extrapolation or simply it basically follows from what is present already prior strikes me as being, I think, very hard to accept. But then there was this issue of Honneth, because you were saying that he might side more with Schmid than with Habermas, insofar as Honneth is prepared to accept the importance of a pre-discursive, pre-linguistic dimension. And I agree with that, but I also think there are some elements in Honneth's work. I mean, my knowledge of Honneth's work is very restricted to certain of his works, but there, for instance, in the Reunification, is that one of his books?
Yes.
So what because at one point, I mean, he talks about the importance of a kind of recognition that takes place at a very basic level, even prior to kind of recognizing specific properties, and virtues to others. So it's a very, and I actually take that. So I've written about that. I take that actually to be somewhat reminiscent of this empathy on the that level. So you're not yet ascribing specific, mental states to others. It's an even more basic form of recognition that just, highlights you vis-a-vis, say, inanimate objects. And I mean, Schütz talks about this as a Du-Einstellung. He talks about how you can have this, this you attitude even before you kind of assign specific further properties to the other. And insofar as Honneth wants to make room for that kind of recognition on the pre-discursive dimension, I think that moves him much closer to my position than Schmid's position, because this recognition, I mean, this reciprocal dyadic relation, I mean, I think fits fairly neatly with my account, insofar as I want to put a strong emphasis on the importance of this dyadic relation, whereas for Schmid, he thinks it makes no difference, because he's very explicit about saying that the I-thou relation doesn't, is a latecomer, doesn't play any kind of formative role for intentionality. So I would say that on the one hand, Honneth might have something in common with Schmid vis-a-vis Habermas, but I also think he has something. But I also think you can kind of push him or pull him in the direction of me rather than Schmid. So I guess another way of putting it is to say I read Honneth as a generation of the Frankfurter school that is much more open to ideas coming from phenomenology than Habermas.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's nice.
Okay, thank you. Now, yes, well, I actually wanted to say that there is still time for a very, very good comment if somebody wants to say something, but I think that the mood is different. So, yes, I guess let's just finish the seminar. Thank you all once again.
Thanks a lot for your comments.